Some of you may still be subscribed from my channel from when I used to make more atheist style content, but I kind of want to combine my old style of content with my new style of political content and talk about how should leftists in general feel about drawing the Prophet Muhammad. Of course, I'm talking about this not just because of the Charlie Hebdo thing in 2015, but also because of the recent controversy in France after a teacher was killed for showing caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad. This is actually a really tricky discussion, and I'm really open to having people's opinions in the comments, and I want this to be more of a discussion, I guess, compared to some of my other videos where it's just me giving you my opinion. So please, in the comments, let me know how you feel, and let's try and keep it civil as well. Also, if you want to support my work, please like the video, maybe subscribe. As you can imagine, most of my content does not get monetized. It is not advertiser friendly. So if you want to support my content financially, my Patreon is also in the description. Also in the description is all my social media links and my subreddit. So before we go any further, I also want to frame the conversation and let's talk about the recent controversy in France before I go any further. So Indian Express, I don't even know what this outlet is, but it actually did have some good reporting on the issue that generally summed it up. So on October 16th, an 18-year-old Chechen refugee in France beheaded school teacher Samuel Paty, 47, days after he had shown caricatures of Prophet Muhammad to his students. President Macron responded to this tragedy and said, "We will continue, we will defend the freedom that taught you so well, and we will bring secularism." He said France would not give up cartoons, drawings, even if others backed down. Days before Paty's killing, Macron had made a controversial speech, and he declared that Islam is a religion that is in crisis today all over the world, plagued by radical temptations and by a yearning for a reinvented jihad, which is the destruction of the other. And I want to get back to this point later, because I feel a lot of these countries, including my own, kind of are ignoring the massive rise of Christian white supremacy we are seeing in the West and are still focused on Islam primarily. So in response, there was obviously a lot of solidarity with what the guy was trying to do at the school. So another French outlet reporting, a French city defied Islamist terrorism by projecting huge images of Charlie Hebdo caricatures on a local government building on Wednesday as heavily armed police officers stood guard. The projections, which included caricatures of Prophet Muhammad, came as part of a French national tribute to middle school teacher Samuel Paty, which took place on Wednesday evening. So Regional Mayor Carole Delga was quoted by France Bleu, a network of local and regional radio stations in France, and part of the national public broadcasting group Radio France, and said, "There must be no weakness in the face of the enemies of democracy, facing those who transform religion into a weapon of war, those who intend to destroy the Republic." Obviously, freedom of speech isn't unique to France, but this is a French issue in many ways because of some of their views of what their nation is. So in France, many citizens fiercely defend the laicite, French word for secularism that separates religion and the state in the country, and sees freedom of expression as absolute. For many French citizens, the freedom to practice one's religion is just as important as another person's right to poke fun at it, even if it's perceived as insulting, such as the Charlie Hebdo caricatures of Prophet Muhammad. Now, if you were wondering, Muslims don't like drawings of Prophet Muhammad or caricatures of Prophet Muhammad because, like, I guess a couple Christian groups as well, they feel like if you draw symbols, that will start, I guess, idolatrous worship of these symbols. It's kind of similar to how a lot of Christian denominations don't have saints because they don't want the people to start worshipping the saints instead of God and Jesus. And it's not outlined properly in the Quran, but it's just a generally, well-known thing in Islam that numerous Islamic scholars have written about. So we framed the conversation, and I'm going to talk about, general attitudes to Muslims in France as well later on. But obviously, on the surface, do I even need the title of the video? Of course, in a free country, it's perfectly fine to criticize someone's religion. It's also fine to mock someone's religion. And this happens a lot in many different Western countries. Of course, you make fun of people for their religion, including, Scientologists, Mormons, Christians, Catholics. I'm, of course, a former Catholic myself. I was raised Catholic, and I fundamentally disagree with the Catholic Church's teachings on things like, sex, on things like abortion. Obviously, I disagree with the whole institution of the Catholic Church. I can make jokes about the awful things they do and the sexual abuse cover-ups and they can get offended all they like, but that's my right to do it. So drawing Prophet Muhammad, of course I'm not a Muslim, it's not in my religion or any rule of law that I cannot draw Prophet Muhammad, even if it's in, degrading or offensive ways. Again, I'm protected by the law to do that, and if I want to do that, I can. Now, this is the argument you will hear from a lot of people, and it's totally rational. And I made a video last week about the skeptic community and about how rational they are, and they would make the similar thing, don't get offended, we don't have to abide by your religion. So on a surface level, it's of course perfectly fine to do those things. Even most Muslims would say what these people are doing with Charlie Hebdo and with the killing of her teacher is totally wrong. What is not mentioned in this conversation is that most Muslims do not do that. Most Muslims, although they might find it offensive, they might find it alienating, they don't go and kill people who do it in really brutal ways. And I think that's worth noting, because I want to get into what Macron said as well. So Macron is talking about Islam being in crisis just before this. And we all know the West has had a problem with the Islamic world for the last century. Let's think about what we've actually done to those countries, and let's think about how we've cultivated the extremism which they say puts Islam in crisis, how we have really pushed to the side more moderate groups in favour of people who will do our bidding. Let's think about Gaddafi, Assad, who we used to be pals with. Let's think about when we funded Saddam Hussein to attack Iran. Let's think about how we fund and back Saudi Arabia. Again, France, Britain, the US, there's not really much right for you to criticise Islam as being in crisis while backing the guys who funded Al-Qaeda for years, the country where Osama bin Laden came from, the country where a lot of these funds for spreading Wahhab Islam around the world is from. Again, you don't get to say Islam is in crisis, but one of the most fundamentalist country, here's a bunch of weapons to go bomb other countries in the region and do what you want and spread your fundamentalist interpretation of this religion. So France already has a controversial history of Islam, and unlike a lot of other countries, it's actually suffered from Islamic terrorism for a lot longer because of the Algerian War of Independence, where they would bomb mainland Paris and mainland France. But that was more, I guess, a struggle for the independence of Algeria, and while these guys were Muslim, and obviously that played its role in the struggle for independence, I guess it's not fair to characterise it as the same as these Charlie Hebdo attacks. But when you have local governments putting caricatures of Muhammad on government buildings, I think that's where the problems start to begin. Now again, I understand they're showing solidarity, they're showing, we are French, we are secular, we have the rights to mock religion, and if we want to put Muhammad on a government building, then that's fine. I'm not saying personally you can't do it, I'm not saying the media can't do it, I'm not saying journalists can't do it, but when the government start to do it, even if it is local governments, combined with what Macron says, it's very counterproductive. So I've spoken about the general argument and how, it makes sense that you should be allowed to insult religion and, I guess in theory, draw Prophet Muhammad. Now, I guess as leftists and as progressives, we're thinking more in terms of the power dynamics. So I'm thinking about Macron's comments about Islam. Of course, I mentioned that already. And I'm talking about the government buildings, right? So projecting this caricature of Prophet Muhammad on government buildings. Now, if you are the majority of Muslims in France, you obviously do not agree with what has happened with Charlie Hebdo and what has happened recently with the teacher. Even if you do find what he did offensive, you did not agree with that, and of course, you did not go out and commit violence against him or against people who draw caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad. But what this feels like to me, what they're doing is by showing their solidarity by putting these caricatures up, which they know Muslims in general, not just radicals, Muslims in general will find offensive, you are alienating them. You're making them feel like they are the other. You're making it feel like you are legitimizing offensive remarks towards them. And because it's the government, even though it's local, it's meant to represent the people. So can you imagine if the French government started putting pictures of, I guess, of aborted fetuses up and saying, this is the women's right to do this, or any other things that would be offensive to other religions on a government building? I don't feel like that would happen, especially because France has a history as a Catholic and a Christian country, although it is a secular country now. So of course it's easy for the powerful and friends of the powerful to have this kind of protest where they will put caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad on government buildings. but we cannot reverse the roles there. We know that a lot of Muslims in France are from France's ex-colonies. A lot of them live in poor areas, and the French government is obviously institutionally racist, just like many Western governments, and discrimination against Muslims is historic, and it has really led to many race riots in France and general riots, and Muslims in general obviously feel some sort of discrimination from the French government, and the power dynamic there is that these Muslims are pretty powerless. And even if most of them are fairly conservative and right-wing Muslims, most of them are not going out and committing violence against people who show these caricatures. And in my mind, Macron's comments and this together is a slap in the face to people who are more moderate, because it's making them feel alienated, it's making them feel like they are all getting punished. And of course, what it's going to do is radicalise even more of them, because what they're going to say is, look, the government thinks you're all like him, the government does not care about Muslims, the government is going to offend Muslims on purpose, see how much they hate you, why don't you come join a more, I guess, radical group of Islam, a group of Islam or a train of thought in Islam which will commit violence in response to things like this. This has caused an international firestorm with Turkey and Pakistan saying loads of stuff about Macron, saying they're going to boycott French goods, saying it's Islamophobic, and I don't agree with that. And conceptually, like I said, I think it's fine to draw Prophet Muhammad, I think it's fine to insult religion, because conceptually I think it's fine to draw caricatures of Muhammad, I think it's fine to insult religion, and I think this concept that the French have is also fine. But when the government get involved, the government clearly have a bias, and the government are saying stuff like there is a massive problem with Islam while backing the people who create a lot of these problems, and then local governments are putting up caricatures of Prophet Muhammad. All you are doing is alienating a group of people in France who historically and right now are marginalised, they're poorer economically, and they do not have a political voice in the same way Christians do and white secularists in France. So while you can protect freedom of speech and while you can come out and say all this stuff like people should have the right to do these things in a free country, I do not feel the strategy Macron and local French governments are doing to show their solidarity is a good one, and what is going to happen is just exacerbate the problem and lead to more of these events, and probably lead to more Muslims being radicalised in France and abroad, and they will come to France to attack it. And annoyingly, I feel the responses to Charlie Hebdo and now this really play into both the far right's hands and Islamic terrorist hands, because the far right will say, see, look at the Muslims, you can't even criticise their religion without them killing you, clearly they're not like us French. And then it's obviously the conclusion of that is they are not French. That even though they're French citizens, they live here, they pay tax, they vote, they are not French because they can't really abide this laicite ideology we have. Whereas Islamic terrorists will be like, well, see, French government, you know they kind of always hated you, and now look what they're doing. They are putting caricatures of Muhammad on buildings to directly insult you and make you feel like you are not welcome in France. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like I said, I want this to be a conversation. If you like the video, please like, maybe subscribe to the channel. If you want to follow me on social media, follow me at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to find me on Reddit, my subreddit is r/theKavernacle. Personal Reddit is u/TommyCahill1995. Also, check out my Patreon, check out my writings, check out my podcast. I'm also on TikTok now, where I'm just posting little clips of my videos. That's just the Kavernacle on TikTok. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.